Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Freshly Pressed. Today we have with us Sydney local Tim McEwen. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. In your own words, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into comics in the first place? What got you interested in reading them and then writing them?
Cool. All right. A little bit about myself. It's funny. I normally say I don't like talking about myself that much, but then once you get me started, you can't shut me up. So it'll be a little bit of both, I think. Uh, so I'm a when I meet new people and they say, "What do you do?" I say, "I don't know. Do lots of everything." But I'm trained as a graphic designer, but I don't do that very much anymore. Um, Mostly because I don't really enjoy it. But at my age, when we were leaving high school, if you were artistically bent, it was hard to find an artistic job, like a real job. And graphic design seemed to be the closest thing to it. So that's kind of what I fell into. Um, but it's drawing that I like to do, and it's drawing and storytelling that I like to do. And so um, that's kind of what I'm trying to do more and more as I get older. It's amazing how long you can live and still be trying to figure out what it is that you should do with your life. And I'm still doing that. So right now, I'm actually, when people say, "What do you do?" I actually do say I'm a comic book artist, even though I don't make any money yet, because this year is really the first year where um, I'm really saying I'm a comic book artist. So I've got to get a few comics out before um, we know how financially viable that is. Which you're an Australian, right? You know that in Australia, very few people make a living
Yep.
from comics, and
Yep.
the ones that do usually are doing it for the big companies, not really doing their indie stuff like what I'm hoping and planning to do. Um, so, what do I do other than that? At the moment, I'm a lecturer, so I teach animation students lots of different things, but the main things seem to be mostly storytelling and drawing related. So I teach a lot of character design. I teach storyboarding, environment design. How to draw a three-dimensional space. I do a lot of figure drawing, like a life drawing. I take those classes a lot as well, and that's really great. I find it very difficult to work for someone and make money for them. And education is still working for someone because they own the institute, but I feel like I'm really working for the students and
Yeah.
trying to give them what they have come for, which is an ability to increase their skills, right? So I really do love that. So I'm doing that this year again. I took a year off, but I'm doing that again this year. So that should be cool. Um,
Wow.
but in the past, I've also been a storyboard artist. I've storyboarded on 3 feature films, Happy Feet 2. I was actually on Happy Feet 1 for about a week or two, not long enough for me to really say that I worked on it. But I was on Happy Feet 2 for nearly 4 years. I worked on the Blinky Bill movie, the most recent one, the CGI one. And,
Yeah.
and I did some boards for Wolf Creek 2 as well. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, that most of the work I do seems to be drawing and storytelling based.
That's
Um,
amazing.
so yeah, and you say how did I get into comics? Right, I can't remember because it was so long ago. Um, I was really young. Like you know how sometimes people ask you what's your first memory, right? Um, I, I I don't have very many, like preschool memories, but I can
Mm.
remember sitting on the floor. My parents had like a flat, a unit in Ashfield here in Sydney, and and we moved out of that into a house, but they kept the unit and rented it out. And
Yeah.
in between two tenants, they were painting it. And I can remember being there on weekends because I had to be while they were painting. But I can
Yeah.
remember sitting on the floor with like this many comics, like a stack this tall, right, of the old Newton reprints. So I don't know if you know what
Yeah.
they are, like
Yeah.
the black and white reprints in the 70s of the stuff that was coming out in America in the 60s. And I can remember having those and thinking to myself, this is my collection. And it's like it spontaneously comes to us, right? Us comic
Yeah.
collectors, that it's just a natural
Yeah.
thing. This is my collection. I had never met anyone who read a comic before, and yet I knew,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
inherently that this is how it works. This is what I've got, and it'll grow, and it's amazing. So that's how I got into comics. And they were all superhero comics. I can remember um, at one point I was in hospital once, and my parents brought me comics. Great, cool, and it was like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and I'm going, no, I don't want to read these at all. Where's where are the superheroes? So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's so fascinating. It's funny you actually said Happy Feet and Happy Feet too, because I think a friend of mine did work in CG
oh yeah.
department. Yeah, there at George Miller's studios a while ago.
Well, I mentioned
Yeah,
I probably won't know them because there was people working on it. But yeah, I got I,
yeah,
I got that job via Mark Sexton, who back in the day did Bug and Stump comics, but now is a world famous storyboard artist.
that's amazing.
And yeah, he got me on both those projects, which was great. So
Yeah, and a lot more movies are being made in Australia now, like than at that time, right? At that time, we
yeah,
only had a few handful of studios here, but now it's pretty much every movie now is shot in either New South Wales or Queensland. So,
yeah, yeah. And storyboarding is interesting because it's visual storytelling, which is what comics are. And my comics were my portfolio to get me the job. I just showed them comics, and my comics proved to the people that were in the interview with me that I could draw, and
yeah,
that I could draw a realistic or believable three-dimensional space with three-dimensional characters. I could stay on model. But probably more importantly than anything, I could tell the story visually. That was probably the most important thing. And so, yeah, they were my kind of portfolio. I just rocked up with the Greener Pastures comics and they flicked through those. Um, but, storyboarding and comics, both being visual storytelling mediums, they're completely different. And for, I know for some people it probably isn't an issue, but for me, it's a real, um, I've got to really consciously switch gears and remember what the rules are for one versus the other. Um, but I love them both. They're really interesting. The kind of space that you can play in visually, one
mm,
versus the other, what you can do with one and not the other, and vice versa.
that's amazing. And it's funny you say that because I did storyboarding for my comic when I did that in the first place. So I know the distinction slightly. Yeah, you were saying.
That's the thing that I'm an old man, right? So these things drive me mad the older I get. When a lot of people say storyboarding for their comics, they really mean that they're doing thumbnails or rough layouts. But storyboarding for movies is like the storyboards. But when people say they're storyboarding for comics, they mean that they're just roughing out the comic, which is what I do for that as well. But like I say, the rules are different. You're looking at, a page shape, which can break up into any kind of shape versus the screen shape, which you can't play with. Once it's set, all those kind of things. Lots of different kind of rules that are different for both, and different ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. They're different mediums, so you have to work with them differently. Of course, yeah. That's so awesome. But don't say that it's your first year of being into comics. You've been around for 30 years now, man.
Yeah,
Come
no,
on.
it's not it's not my first year of making comics, but this is the first year where I'm going to try to really make it the major uh, income for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've been making comics for a long time, and again, I was making comics in my late teens. Like I was making comics before that, but I was actually getting published in my late teens, like in a local local newspaper. Um,
Mm.
so comic strips, like Sunday comic strip size comic strips. Um,
Oh, wow.
and then I did a few short stories for a couple of local anthologies. Um, but if we'll talk about Greener Pastures and how that came to be, one of the strips that we did was Greener Pastures as a comic strip for a university newspaper before it was a comic. So That was way back then as well. But then, yeah, Greener Pastures has been my main focus comic book wise ever since. Even though like that's kind of come and gone.
Cool. Yeah, and also I don't know how autobiographical it is, but they seem to be. It seems to be coming from a very personal space. It seems
Yeah,
to be drawing from a very personal space. So, uh, do, can you get us in a bit into what Greener Pastures is and how you stumbled upon that idea?
yeah. So Greener Pastures, that's the first printing of the first issue.
Yay!
You've got the second printing of the first issue,
Yeah.
and you see this one's already signed to someone. Like, so I don't have many copies of this first printing left. So I've got I've got that signed copy sitting here. Um, so Green the Pastures is by me and Michael Michelandos. So he's uh, primarily writer. I'm primarily artist, but these things cross over a little bit. I came up with the concept a long time ago and handed the concept to Michael, who was trying to figure out something to write for the both of us to work on. And then he wrote this amazing story, which is pretty is coming from a pretty personal space for him. And so to take you all the way back, right? Michael was at the University of New South Wales. I was at the Uni of Western Sydney, and we were both studying. And the newspaper at his uni, Tharunka, said that they had space for comic strips. And we had done a couple of short stories together. We hadn't hung out too much. We'd hung out a little bit. We knew each other a little bit, but it was again one of those things where you don't really know too many other people who make comics, so you really kind of cling on to the ones that you find. And
Yeah.
I hope Michael, I hope Michael feels it too. But I feel really lucky that Michael was one of the first people that I met to collaborate with, and we've been together ever since. So that was 1990. That's a long time ago, and
Wow.
we were trying, or he was trying to come up with an idea for the comic strip. You know, something that was kind of based at the university or university students would relate to, be interested in, um, and and he also wanted to have something to say, which is great. That I was talking earlier about wanting to read superhero comics, but by this stage, I was really interested in in creating something that was probably not superhero related. Um, so we were trying to figure out something that wasn't cliche or hadn't already been done. You know, and you know, aliens coming from space and landing at the university, going, "Oh, what's this about? Somebody help me figure out what life on Earth is all about." Like too cliche. And I went on uh, a farm stay holiday for about a week or so with a bunch of friends, um, including my then girlfriend, now wife, and we the farmer took us on a four-wheel drive around the farm, right, to show us around. And I'm looking out at the the beautiful countryside and the cows and the bulls, and it struck me that the cows were like they weren't doing anything. Like it looked like it was a pretty boring thing to do, just sitting there. Sure, it's idyllic, right? It's beautiful and
Yeah.
idyllic. I said, so what do they do? Like, what do the cows do? And the farmer is almost verbatim to what we wrote in the beginning of the first issue of Greener Pastures. That the farmer said, "Well, see that tree that they're sitting under over there? Yeah. Well, they were doing that, but under that tree earlier today, and that's it, right? So, and the first like 4 or 5 pages, whatever it is, of Greener Pastures #1, like came to me there and then. Like you would be bored, you would stand up, you would walk to the farmer's door and knock on
Yeah.
the door and say, "I'm bored, can I come in?" And I gave that to Michael and I said, "Is this something we could work with?" And he loved it. And the next time we spoke, he actually had, and I'm hoping I'll find it. We're decluttering the house. That's why my studio is a mess. Um, I'm hoping that we find it in my files. He gave me like I reckon it's like a 3 paragraph outline of Trevor's entire life story. That's the name of the bull, Trevor. His whole life story from that point on. Like, so Michael immediately kind of had this epic story that we wanted to tell. And we did like, I don't know, it was about 10 or 12 episodes as a comic strip, again Sunday size kind of comic strip in the paper, and that was really cool. I had a lot of fun doing it. I learned a lot doing that and found a lot of mistakes and rectified those. Michael's a very challenging writer. There's one episode of that uh, comic strip that's just terrible, and it's not because of what he wrote, but because I couldn't make it work, and it was all about words going in one ear and out the other, and trying to play with that visually, and it's like nobody understands what I drew there.
Yeah.
All of those kind of things I worked through at that point, and we both kind of graduated from uni, which meant that he couldn't do the comic strip anymore. But people had seen it, and it got reprinted in an American comic. It got
Oh,
reprinted in an Australian mini. And Michael and I, both at the same time, kind of contacted each other and said, we should redo this, but do it as a comic book. And that's when we
mm,
started redoing the story from scratch as self-publishers, and that's where that came from in
that's amazing.
1994. So that's
That's
30 years ago that the first issue came out. So yeah, that's kind of the story of where that came from.
That's so fascinating. Did you have like a lot of? It seems like we didn't have a con at even back then, and like it was a much smaller scene than what it is now. Even now, it's actually quite small. But like 30 years ago, it might we do have a few cons at least in New South Wales now. But
Yeah,
maybe back then it might have been even quieter, right?
it was completely different scene. So it was well early, before internet, before web comics. Um, so there was one convention. So you might have seen as I was flashing it around on the back there. There's an ad for King's Comics,
Yeah.
which is still a shop here in Sydney, and uh, they made a convention called OzCon. Um,
Mm,
and just before OzCon, I think it was just before OzCon happened, there was a comic called Issue One Comics, which was a sci-fi cyberpunk sort of anthology, which was really cool, which I got involved with because I knew all of those guys before they launched it. So I
mm.
got involved with those guys for a little while. So Issue One, which then created Cyberswine and Zero Assassin, which were two really cool characters. So I helped them out with their comics with my graphic design skills and knowing how to talk to printers and stuff like that. Um, and they took that to the first OzCon, which must have been
Mm.
1992, I'd say. I think that's right. So OzCon was in 1992. I was overseas at the time. That's just before Michael and I restarted Greener Pastures. So in 1993 for OzCon, I helped out at their booth at Issue One booth at OzCon, and in 1994 we launched Greener Pastures at OzCon. At
Wow.
Was it that Center Point? I think that one. Yeah. So
Mm.
so there was one big convention, and it was a comic convention because they weren't pop culture conventions yet. They had comic book artists from America. They did not have um, movie stars or voice actors. Um, and that ran for about 7 or 8 years. And the last couple of years, trading cards started to come in really big. Pogs were like the last thing to come in. And they started to have a few voice actors and stuff, I think. So that was kind of the end of that. But at that
Yeah.
point, there was like a bit of a black and white boom here in Australia. There was, Greener Pastures and Hairbutt the Hippo and Bug and Stump and Platinum Grit and Southern Aurora Presents and Anthology and all, a few things like that, as well as a really thriving, amazing mini comic scene, all those photocopied mini comics. So it was a really cool
Ah.
scene. It did seem a little bit Sydney centric, maybe Sydney and Melbourne centric, but it was happening everywhere. There was stuff happening in Perth that I didn't hear about for 5 years, but stuff happening all over the country, and uh, and yeah, so and the fact that there was a comic convention actually boosted that happening. But again,
Mm.
because it was a very different time, we were printing Greener Pastures offset on newsprint, and
Yeah.
we printed 10,000 copies, and most of those copies went to newsagents, and that's where we got a lot of our fans from, and that's just not possible now. Like newsagents don't want comics. I mean, they didn't want them then. There's all sorts of stories I could tell you about that, but they did. That was where you could sell comics. The specialty shop, and then through newsagents, and that was a great way to sell. We sold, thousands of copies that way. We got people in country towns to read comics that would otherwise never have heard of an Australian comic. I still have people tell me that in their little Australian country town, um, being able to read Greener Pastures and Platinum Grit and Bug and Stump made by Australians was the thing that made them say, I can be an artist. I can
Wow.
make comics in this country. It's not an American thing. It's anybody can do it. So it
Yeah.
was a really it was an important thing. I think the internet has um, you know taken over a lot of that idea that you can make you know as in these people are inspirational to you. But yeah, so yeah, it was an interesting time, very different to now.
No, that's absolutely amazing because I feel like when people see something that connects to them, say, you told a very Australian story, and uh, actually an American farmer can actually read, American countryside person can actually read this and relate with it as well. But especially for an Australian farmer or somebody in Australian rural side to actually be able to read this and go like, I can relate to this story. This is a very Australian story, and
You,
it's created by Australians.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of the other things, and I tell this story reasonably often. Like most of the stories I'm telling you, I tell often. So, dear listeners and watchers, sorry if you've heard these stories before, but this one is a really important one for me, and it's this that um, there's kind of in these early issues three main characters: Trevor, and then Trevor finds a really good friend in Colin, and Colin's flatmate Caesar. And Colin is a political activist, and that is his entire life. And he's hilarious because he's inept, right, at all of this stuff. But he's got a heart of gold. But his flatmate Caesar is a complete hedonist, right? The hedonist. He just he just lives for himself. Um, Now, it's never stated outright, but it's pretty obvious that he's gay, right? And it's not like that's a major part of the story, and it's not like he looks like he's the token gay. It's just like this is who in Michael's life, drawing on his life to create Greener Pastures. This is the kind of characters that he wanted to make. And so I heard from a reader about 5 years ago, right? So this is many years after we published, who tracked me down on Instagram and actually had done some fan art for me and all sorts of things. And I knew who he was because he was doing some mini comics and stuff. And then eventually one day he direct messaged me and said, I've never told you this, but finding Greener Pastures in the newsagent in my little country town was amazing for all the reasons we've just said, right? Because it's Australian, and you can be an artist in Australia, etc., etc. But he said on top of that, I was the only gay person I knew in the world, and to see like a character who you're not making a big deal out of being gay, he's just one of the three guys. Um, really was important to me at the time, and it really meant a lot to me. So, and no one had told me that before, and that was pretty amazing. So, all of us, the guys and the men and women who made Platinum Grit and Bug and Stump and Hairbud, etc., we all knew that we were getting to country towns as well as the big cities. But that was the first time I really heard how important it was that we were like a pop culture incursion in places where culture, that might not get to in that way, So that like kind of brought tears, like I welled up reading that.
Wow.
It was amazing, and Caesar becomes a more and more important character as we go ahead as well. He's got a great part in issue 8. You've just read the preview edition of that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So you were at least 20 years ahead of your time representing people in pop culture.
At least we were just doing whatever came naturally.
That's so amazing. And like I absolutely love those stories as well. Like as somebody I grew up in India, and it's we also had a very similar system. We used to either do mail orders or for comic books, or we used to get them with the news agent. And we would actually put in like a monthly subscription for a particular comic. So say let's say Marvel, and they would not even say like, if, will the next issue be an X-Men issue, or will the next issue be? So they would just Marvel or DC or Phantom Comics. We used to have those, Phantom and Mandrake and
Yeah,
all those fascinating comics from the 80s and 90s.
yeah.
So we used to put in those orders, and the comics used to show up at our door.
Yeah,
First day of the month.
I never
Yeah.
really subscribed, but it was an exciting part of my Saturday morning after doing my paper run to spend like an hour or so doing a circuit that I had figured out to every um, suburban newsagent that was in bike riding distance and just see what comics they had, whether they were imports or black and white reprints. And that was the only way you could get comics, as far as I knew, until I discovered a
Yeah.
comic shop. And yeah, you get issue, 4. Will you ever see issue 5, or is the next one going to be issue 8? Is that like the next one you're going to find? So, like, but I
Wow.
would just whatever I could get my hands on, I would get. Yeah,
Yeah. And like, we never had the concept of comic book shops in India till, I think, very recently, till like what, last like 5 or 8 years ago or 10 years ago. Till then, like, we used to buy comics either from our own newsagent, or we used to have these long train journeys, and we had news agents at the train station, so that was part of the journey. When you go to the train station, you buy a big stack of comics to read on the way.
do you still have them? Did they come with you?
What the
Your childhood comics, the comics that you would buy.
I do have a lot of them, but they are back home. Not of
Oh, okay.
I did get a few of them actually recently. I think a couple of years ago when I went back to India. I got some Phantom, some really old Batman comics, especially from the, like the early '90s. The ones inspired by Batman, the animated series, the original ones.
Yeah. Yep.
So I got some of those, the early runs from Ty Templeton, and
Fantastic.
some of my most dearest comic of forever is X-Men 1 by Jim Lee and Chris Claremont, and I still hold on very close to them. I never try to lose
Yeah.
them. They're still with me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I do have some of the old comics still with me, and yeah, I love to keep them, archive them nicely. So yeah, they're still there, still going.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
But yeah, tell us a bit about issue 8.
Yeah.
What I actually loved. I'll tell you one thing. Sorry, I want to say something
Yeah.
before you get into it. I absolutely love the fact that you don't tell don't tell the reader when there's a new artist in the story. Um, it just, like, it happened to me when I first switched, when the first switch happened, and I was like, okay, and the story kept on going, and then I was like, I just got used to it after a couple of times, and it was just so
Cool.
beautiful. I loved it.
That's great. Well, so we published 7 issues of Greener Pastures from 1994 to 1997. Um, and we published 2 half issues and some mini comics and a bunch of shorts as well. But number 7 really was like the last issue that we got to. Number 8 was written and thumbnailed, right? But we never got around to doing it. So Michael and I both kind of, we had full on jobs, and we had kids, and we had mortgages, and it didn't seem to be like something that we could do is to find time to make comics. And every time that I said to Michael, I reckon we could get back into this now, Michael would say, oh, I can't really do it right now. And any time that Michael said to me, how about we do it now? I say, no, I can't do it now. And it just never seemed to synchronize. Um, but we finally did synchronize. So issue 8 is like the big re relaunch party. And I know it's like still like single figures, and it's like many years later, but that's the preview copy that you were holding up before. Yeah. But
Yeah.
the idea for number 8 was, let's take the script that was written in 1997 and publish it now, as a bridge from the old stuff to the new stuff. So we've got 3 more issues set in 1997 written, and they're on the drawing board. And then after that, we move into 2020, and Trevor, all of a sudden, is in his middle age, right? So
Ooh.
kind of, and that's about a 400-page graphic novel, which is already written, and about 24 pages of that, or maybe more like 30 pages of that, is drawn. So we're kind of all over the place at the moment. But number 8, being the relaunch, I thought I really wanted to do something special. I didn't want to just draw the next issue, and say, here we are. I wanted to have a bit of a party. So the idea was to take that script, thumbnail it all out, and then give 1 page of thumbnails to a different artist, each page to a different artist. So in the end, we've got 30 different contributors. This is written by Lewis Purdy, right? So Michael's handed this over to Lewis to write. Written by Lewis Purdy, all thumbnailed by me, which a lot of the contributors ignored, which is great. I wanted them to do their own style. And then 28 different pencilers, and I inked and lettered the whole thing. So the fact that
Wow.
there are artists who have got a really kind of Bigfoot cartoony style, um, like Aaron Hunting, and then the next page is by Al Barrian Nouveau, in a really quite realistic style, right? Very realistic on one side and quite cartoony on the other. And I inked and
Yeah.
lettered it all. And everyone
Wow.
who's read it seems to say that, yeah, it takes like a couple of pages, and then you go, it's fine, and it just flows from one page to the other. And my my inking was, like, I was pretty adamant that I didn't want to overpower anything and make it look like it was Tim McEwen's work. I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that every page was reasonably, or if not really distinctly recognizable as each artist. But just to have the kind of brushwork that I do, and the kind of hatching and cross hatching that I do, having just enough of that on every page kind of seems to hold it all together. Because that happens throughout. I've got so many different artists, from page to page. So it was, and then I did 6 pages myself, because we're introducing for the first time Trevor's love interest. So this is continuing the story. It's not like out of nowhere. So we're introducing his love interest for the first time. So I did all 6 of those pages myself.
That's
Yeah, we've got
incredible.
people like Dave Sim, who does a comic, or used to, sorry, did a comic called Cerebus, 300 issues that he wrote and drew and published himself, with the help of background artist Gerhard. Um, so he's, as far as comic books are concerned, like, he's probably my biggest influence, and a big hero. So I asked him if he would like to contribute, and the fact that he said yes was like, it really blew me away.
Yeah.
Ashley Wood, who is, one of Australia's biggest ever comic book artists, as well as making toys and, all sorts of things, painting and oils and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
His page was probably the most fun to ink. Like, it was just so outside of how I normally work. And I wanted to learn so much from him. I just love his work so much, and it's just not me at all. So I wanted to really absorb some of that if I could. I'm kind of not real keen on showing too many of the pages, but because I want people to buy them. But there's like Ashley Wood and um, and uh, uh, and Chumba Cruz. Um, Gary Challoner is probably one of the best artists in the world, if not
Yeah.
in Australia, if not the world. And he's a hero of mine, so I was so glad to have him on board. Um, Dean
His
Ray,
page is incredible. Yeah.
famous for doing Simpsons comics opposite Marty Abel there. So many different people. Um,
Yeah.
and it was a great thing. And that's Dave Sim even did the title lettering on the first page, which,
So
he's
good.
renowned for his amazing lettering. So um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was part of the reason. Don't tell anybody. Sorry, I don't tell anybody. But part of the reason why we were doing this jam issue is so that I didn't have to work so hard on getting the read going. and it's been, I would have done it like 5 times faster if I just drawn the whole thing myself. So it's not like that's easy to do. A jam issue, it's not easy to do,
Oh,
but
not at all.
the outcome is just so fantastic. I really
Yeah. The very fact that you managed to get so many people to do this is a big feat in itself. So, I mean, hats off to you,
think
and kudos to everyone who's involved, because it's an incredible issue. It does come together really beautifully. Um, and yeah, like it is, it's a romp. Like this one is really fun to read.
yeah,
Like
that was a great idea. You saw the title page. It's called "Sweet Sweet Release." Is the title of the story, right? But the working title, way back in 1997, the working title was "Sex and Violence." That's what the story was to be about. So it's not a kids' book. Don't go ordering this for your 12-year-old. This is not for them.
no,
But there's nothing overly overt, right, Sorab? It's okay, right? But but they're the themes. Like we try to investigate a bit of a theme every so often, and that was the theme this time, is like sexism and violence as a way of asserting yourself. And now all of a sudden I sound intellectual, right? And we're not trying to be over intellectual, but one of the ways I try to explain what Greener Pastures is that it's a satire dressed up as a funny animal comic. So we've had a few issues that kind of talk about death. What's the meaning of life and what's the meaning of death? But it's all fun, right? It's very funny. Trevor and Colin um, uh, do a raid on the local La Di Da chicken restaurant. Yeah, so you read that one, and which is like our version of Kentucky Fried Chicken,
yeah,
because I want to give all of the chicken carcasses a proper burial. But at the time, the security guard is wearing the La Di Da chicken, mascot outfit, and Trevor, who's had too much whiskey, punches him, and the mask goes flying, and he thinks he's punched the heads off. He goes, "I've killed the chicken god," and it's like, so it's like, what is the meaning of life and death if I can kill a god? And so it's like
yeah,
we do it in a funny way, but it's also very much that one of Colin's driving forces as a character, is that he's scared to death of death,
yeah.
of him for himself, but also for the animals and for his loved ones. And so it's a we try to balance out between laughs and something serious as well.
Yeah, even when I think in issue 2, Trevor goes out to the city for the first time. He comes to Sydney, and then he tries the McDonald's, your version of McDonald's, right?
Yeah,
A Scottish McDonald's, and yeah, and he doesn't realize it's beef, and he finds it really, he finds it really tasty. So
hey, this place looks good. He says, "This must be
yeah,
food for cows." No,
yeah.
food from cows, you idiot. It's not like we push a big vegetarian agenda or anything, but like if you were a bull or a cow in the world of humans, it would be an issue, right? So
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
yeah,
No,
there's
it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
a lot of
There's
free when somebody finally tells him what it is that he's eating. He eats a hamburger, and it's like when he finds out what that is, it's not pretty.
exactly, exactly. Even I think it was the even the first one, even the first issue has a lot of like social commentary, and like the first few pages are actually quite heavy, full of like the farmer's speech, and all those things. Like they're pretty like heavy with the with social commentary and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's and that it comes from character as well. Like you put these characters, and what is going to happen when you put them together? If you're a farmer and the bull, your stud bull, the one that makes all the other cows and bulls that you then sell for your living, if he comes and says, "I'm leaving," that's not good. So, so this is the dilemma, and we
yeah,
characters to act that out, and then the reader is really involved. It's not a soap opera, but you get involved with the characters. So yeah, and
yeah.
real stories are what we're trying to tell. Yeah,
Absolutely, and I think Trevor becomes a vessel to actually have a gaze at at our current world of like human beings, because he has that really like childlike naivety,
Yeah,
to
exactly.
yeah, and then he just goes out in the world.
And
um
I try to tell people, he's the ultimate country boy. Again, that's a cliche that we could have easily fallen into. The country boy comes to the big city, but I think the fact that we can elevate it because he's not even just from the country, he's actually from outside our species. Like it actually enables us to elevate it even a little bit further. But that whole idea of the fish out of water, yeah, it makes it a very fertile space for us to tell all sorts of stories and explore a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when's the campaign launching? And
This is my
where?
first ever Kickstarter campaign. I've never done one before. This is dragging Tim McEwen kicking and screaming into the 2020s because there's no news agents to publish your comics anymore, Tim. How do you do it? So, we're doing the Kickstarter, and that launches on February 8th. And it's a month-long campaign. I'm being helped by Darren Close, who you know from Killaroo, yeah, because he knows what he's doing, and I don't. So he's really helping a lot. I started to think what would have happened if I would just tried to do it myself. So it's actually still being built, and I know I'm here to tell you all about it, but I'm still kind of building it. So it's mostly there though, but it's launching on the 8th. It's the main thing that we're launching is Greener Pastures 8. This is the preview edition that we had at a few conventions. The cover will be similar but different. The interiors will be similar, but there's a few pages that still need a little bit more work done on them. But otherwise very similar. So that's obviously available. Um, I thought because of the fact that we have 28 or 29 different pencilers, um, it would be a really interesting thing to have a pencils only version to buy as well. So you can
Nice.
buy a pencils only version. That's the mock up of the cover, which is my pencils for the front
Wow.
cover. So it'll be
Very
reprinting
cool.
the whole story, but pencils only. So you can see where I just ruined everybody else's artwork. Um, so that's on offer. There's a blank cover version for sketch covering as well, so I can do sketch covers, or you can just buy the blanks to get other people to do sketch covers. Um, I think they're really the three main things that we've got for sale. But all of the back issues are for sale as well, because I know for certain that well, I'm going to be bringing in new readers because I've got
Mm.
Ashley Wood and Nicholas Scott and John Someriver and Dave Sim and all of these great artists. So I really assume that people will come in out of nowhere and go, I want to get Nicholas Scott's latest page, but what the hell is Greener Pastures? So you can actually catch up on the whole thing. We'll have the actual print like the original printed versions, but also PDF versions of all of that stuff. Um, we're probably I shouldn't say probably because I just spent most of yesterday doing stuff like tote bags. I printed these
Ooh,
myself. No, I didn't. I got my daughter to print them because she's a printmaker. But these are printed by
nice.
hand by the McEwen family. Um, so they're going to be part of the Kickstarter as well. Have it in natural and green or white on black.
That's
Beautiful
so beautiful.
comics that we made. Um, Maybe some prints or some mini prints. Darren and I are still kind of talking about stuff like that. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what the Kickstarter is going to look like.
That's amazing. Plenty of stuff to catch up on in the Kickstarter, and if you're new to Greener Pastures, do look out for all the back issues because I think the whole story reads pretty well together. I think I know you didn't write it for binge reading or binge watching, as like all the everything is content these days, right?
Yeah,
Whether it's comics or movies or TV shows, everything is content.
no,
But yeah, you probably didn't write this for binge reading, but I did binge read them, and they did read very well together.
hey,
So,
I hear that sometimes as well because when at comic conventions, I try to sell the first four as I just could we just hang on 1 second? Oh, no, that's all
yeah.
right. Sorry, my wife's just come home and I accidentally locked the back door. I had her around the back so she wouldn't walk past in shot, but she's going to walk past in shot instead. Um, So I'm going to apologize to her now. Sorry, Emery. Walk through. There she is. Um, so what was I about to say? Oh yeah, so I try to sell the first 4 issues as an arc because they work really well as an arc. So most people buy at least 4 issues at a go, if not, 7 issues at a go. Um, so no, a lot of people binge read it, and you know, they go, then where is the next issue? So yeah,
They're actually quite cheap as well, right? So I didn't mind grabbing them all together. Like they
probably won't
three.
happen anymore, Sorab. That's probably it. At conventions, we've been selling them at the original 1990s prices, which is $2.50 and $3. So yeah, it was like you get 100 pages for $10.
Mm.
That's not going to happen anymore. We're going to have to, now that we're back in, production mode. The new issues are going to be more like $10, like everybody else.
Yeah, but like I think the new issues, like you said, the UV printing on newsprint, so they are definitely very different quality of paper, and even production and all those things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Naturally aged newsprint, all gone yellow, and
right, some people would go for it, like some people do want that.
yeah.
So
I did
yeah.
look. This is an interesting thing to me because I'm talking to the printer right now about how we're going to publish this, and I'm asking him, can he find me newsprint that we can digitally print onto? Because I would rather have like a matte newsprint. So this is um, a, a one-off thing that my son and I did. So that's my cover,
Oh,
and that's his
wow,
cover. So he makes
that's
comics as
so
well.
good.
Son Samuel McEwen, and he's actually in number 8. He's one of the contributors, and my daughter is one of the contributors. And Michael Michelandos, the writer of Greener Pastures, co-creator, his daughter is one of the contributors as well. So we've done this like generational thing. But Sam and I did a flip book, and both of us really wanted to do it on newsprint. So our wonderful printer, Jeffrey's Printing, um,
Wow.
was able to source some at that time. In he's the person that was printing that, or sorry, supplying newsprint for digital printing disappeared soon afterwards. So not many people have been able to do that. So I'd really like to be able to do that. There was a printing of a short story called "Your Music Sucks, Man." Again, it's 2 old men, me and Michael, telling the youth of today how great music was back in our day. Minna Oil, the Divinals, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
etc. um, versus current music. But we did it. Samuel and I both did a thing called Read to Me, which is a wonderful thing that happens in Sydney, and it was like in Perth during PCAF as well. I don't know if you can see that photo. That's
Yeah,
a photo from Read to Me, where you read your comic live in front of an audience while the pictures are projected beside you. So we both did
that
it,
is
and then
so fun.
yeah, and then we published this and released an audio tape to go with it of
Wow.
a recording of it. So real old school as much as possible. Audio tape, newsprint, printing, all that stuff.
That's so cool. No, it's amazing. It's also, I think, if it's set in 1997, so it's definitely reminiscent of that time. So amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. We're coming close
No
to
worries.
time, but thanks for coming on the show, and really appreciate you having here. Before you want to go, do you want to give like a quick pitch to the audience about backing your Kickstarter, following it?
Yes, I should have practiced this because you do this for everybody, and I didn't. So yeah, I'd really love it if you came to the party that I'm throwing with the 29 other comic creators in Greener Pastures number 8 as we relaunch this award-winning cult classic from the 1990s. And if you jump on board now, that guarantees that we'll have issues 9, 10, and 11 out later this year, and so on and so forth as we go forward. All of those stories are written and ready to be told. So please get on board. The artwork is amazing, and I can say that because most of it is drawn by somebody else. And so I don't sound like I'm big nerding myself. we're launching on February 8. We'll run for a month. We're still discussing stretch goals and those kind of things, but it's going to be a really cool campaign. Help me be successful with my first ever campaign. I really love it. Thanks.
And if not for anything, buy it for looking at when is Tim going to run out of bull puns. So,
Exactly. Bull
so
bovine puns. I read
yeah, exactly. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show, mate. Really appreciate it, and hope you have a good campaign. All the best for it. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, man. I'll speak again soon. Bye.
Bye.